I decided to do? Well, after all those Godzilla movies, I had to kind of take a break. And what I did was I went and watched a full rewatch of Battlestar Galactica. And the main thing was I just needed something different. I needed a real change of pace. And I kind of put movies aside for a little bit. Now, I have some movies that I've watched for another episode. But after doing the Battlestar Galactica rewatch, I said, all right, let me get back into the fold here. Let me watch a couple of new things. And let me find maybe like a double feature, something that, two films that could kind of work together. They complement each other in some sort of way. I don't know. It was a little bit of a fishing trip to try and figure out what I could watch and maybe talk about. But what I came up with was I saw Drive Away Dolls. So I said, all right, let me watch this. I kind of wanted to see it when it came out. And one of the reasons, of course, is because it's directed by Ethan Coen of the Coen brothers. And if you think about the Coen brothers and their history, their filmography, their style, their taste, let's say, it's really, really entertaining. It's really interesting and eccentric. Other times, it's kind of a miss for me, at least. And so I went into it with open expectations, not really sure what I was getting into, but I just figured, all right, it's kind of a comedy. It's kind of a thriller. Maybe it looks like it's kind of a road trip kind of deal. Turns out, I actually enjoyed it. It is kind of kooky and weird, and it takes some bold swings in some ways, but I feel like it works. I think a big part of that is the cast in the film. Margaret Qualley, who everything I've seen her in up to this point, and it's not everything, it's not a lot, but what I have seen her in, she's just got a magnetism, and I don't know what it is. It's some kind of charisma thing that she's got. And even if she's not playing like in a comedy or something, but there's just something you can't not watch what she's doing. And in this film especially, I think it's because you've got to be game to do some of this, to take this kind of character to the places that she goes. And it's not because it's like a lesbian couple or whatever. I'm talking about even beyond that. It's just like she's kind of doing like a full-on Tommy Lee Jones impression in this film. And it works. And it takes a little getting used to at first, but she owns it and makes it something where it's like you get used to this character, Jamie, that she plays. And it's funny because, the idea of her and her friend who is really kind of buttoned up and maybe repressed and not really just very socially awkward in a way, but they're trying to have, they're going on this road trip, but they're also trying to maybe explore their friendship together. And maybe there's something else there, maybe not. But, the idea of them doing this and really just being oblivious to, there's some bad guys that are chasing them. And it's that kind of dynamic, that mix of comedy and then drama and then a little bit of like thriller aspects and then these sudden just bursts of violence. It's a weird combination, but somebody like the Coen brothers, I see them more often than not pulling this off in their work. And here we've only got Ethan Coen. This is a solo joint, but I think it falls in that same lane as a lot of Coen brothers films. Now, the thing I'll come away saying though is like it doesn't always seem to amount to a lot. It is a stylistic thing. It's a sort of a tone or attitude that a lot of those films tend to play with. But this one, for what it's worth and for how entertaining it can be, it's got some themes in there about friendship and about owning your identity and discovering your identity even. But beyond that, I don't really know. Otherwise, it's just more of kind of a madcap caper in a sense, which is fine. It's easy. It's a fun watch. The cast is great in it. It looks great. It flows great. So I feel like it's at least entertaining enough, But I said, all right, so that was Ethan Coen doing his first solo piece, right? It's kind of weird to think that these two brothers have done so many films, so many like really iconic films at this point, like legendary stuff. And now, only now, recently, they've gone off and done their own things. And so I said, all right, what's the counterpoint to something like this, right? There's got to be something from Joel Coen. And it turns out it was something that it just kind of went right past me. And I remember hearing about this, but I kind of forgot that this came out because it was like at the height of COVID. It was right before I started the podcast, really. But it's a kind of a reimagining of Shakespeare's Macbeth. And that's The Tragedy of Macbeth from 2021. It's directed by Joel Coen and stars Denzel Washington, Frances McDormand. Really, and that's the thing with both of these films, pretty deep casts. And some of the actors are maybe character actors that you might recognize from other things. Maybe they're not like superstars, they're not high profile, but you recognize them. And in both of these films, you've got a lot of people playing some really significant parts and just going for it, just swinging for it. And I think part of that is, one, these roles, both of these stories, they've got some real dynamic qualities to them in terms of the performances that are necessary. But also these two directors, these filmmakers, they've done so much work that is revered and celebrated. And I'm sure that involves a lot of trust on anybody who's in the film of like, okay, well, you're going to be doing something very different, or you're going to have to really go to the next level, or you're going to have to take on a whole different way of speaking. And everybody commits to it, which is great. I mean, I'll say this, The Tragedy of Macbeth, it's classic Shakespeare. It's by the book. I mean, you can't really change Shakespeare and really do much different, right? In terms of the words, in terms of the text. I think the best iterations that we've seen over the years have been the ones where it's about maybe finding a new approach, a new way to present the material, visually, stylistically, whatever, because the material is what it is and it's strong. It's not like you don't have to mess with it, right? You don't have to rewrite Shakespeare. It's just finding a way to make it relevant or to make it unique. And, for me personally, one of those is Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet, or I guess Romeo and Juliet. And that, what was that, like 95 or something like that? That rendition, that film is such a unique piece of work that in some ways, for me, it has become Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it's so strong. It's so well done. And the fact that it's in modern times and it's with actors that we recognize that are essentially movie stars in a way. And yet you've got, you still hold on to the language and you make the language work. And I'm sure that's a big part of why, like a lot of theater actors, a lot of actors are classically trained. They really got to do the reps when it comes to Shakespeare, because you might think, well, the words are the words, and I understand that, but there's always nuance and there's always context. And I think that's where this film, The Tragedy of Macbeth, it does some really different stuff in terms of the way it's shot, the way it looks, the pacing of it. Denzel, of course, is just a powerhouse. And Frances McDormand brings like a real kind of brokenness to it. And, of course, look, if you don't know Macbeth, it's about him and his wife. They're kind of beset with guilt and paranoia, and it starts to rot them from the inside, right? And it starts to play out among other people around them. And so it's one of those things that, it could be taken very literally. And in this case, I think it kind of rides the line. Like it does, because of the way it looks. It's in this stark black and white cinematography. It's shot in a very unique aspect ratio, like 4:3. And it's one of those that it doesn't feel like a film. It doesn't feel like a play, but it doesn't feel like a standard quote unquote film. It doesn't feel very cinematic, put it that way. There's something else to it. I don't know. And so when you drop Shakespeare into that sort of context, into that presentation, you get a very unique piece of work, I think. And this is actually one that, Shakespeare for me, other film versions of Shakespeare, sometimes they're a little hard to get through. I'm not going to lie. I know Kenneth Branagh has done a lot to bring Shakespeare to the big screen. And I know there have been some other like reimaginings of it, like either set things in modern times with all new dialogue and all that. You're just kind of following the premise or the plot. But when you get to a film that can stay on target with the words and with the intent, but still produce something that feels really different and really unique and original, even though it's not, I think that's a mark of some very strong talent behind the wheel. And, it would be one that I wouldn't really consider this my first thought of like, oh, this is what the Coen brothers or one of the Coen brothers would ever want to do or whatever consider doing. But the fact that this is what turned out, it's actually it's actually a pretty strong move. So both of these films in their own ways, they've got strengths. Both of them, I feel like, must be very hard sells of like, okay, this is what we want to do next. He wants to do that. I want to do this. I feel like whoever was involved with producing these or financing these or whatever must have been like, wait, what? Like, what about something like No Country for Old Men or something like The Big Lebowski or Raising Arizona or Blood Simple? Like there's a tendency, I think, for someone who is known for certain types of work. There's a tendency to want them to, in a way, kind of repeat that work. And I get that. And I'm sure that's why we have sequels like we do, right? Whether it's the same filmmaker or the same story or the same characters, like we just want to see more of that. Okay. But here, this is why I always am fascinated with the Coen brothers together and now individually of, they're going to zag. You don't know, you shouldn't know what to expect from them. And so these two films, I feel like they've got strengths, and I think I probably would want to watch The Tragedy of Macbeth again. Drive Away Dolls, I feel like if I caught it in the middle, I'd be fine with just following it all the way through. But I think because for me, it's like Drive Away Dolls, the plot of it, the characters in it are much more relatable and maybe a little more palatable, put it that way. Like I could follow it a little easier or just, catch on faster. A Tragedy of Macbeth, the plot is what it is. It's not that complicated, but the performances and the language, I feel like there's always so much more if you just pay attention a little more, or if you just hear it one more time, you hear something new, or you kind of connect with something differently. And of course, that I think is the enduring power of Shakespeare. Is it's so deep, it's so complex, just it's so sophisticated, put it that way. And so I would recommend both of these. I mean, The Tragedy of Macbeth, I think that's an Apple exclusive, so you can only see it on Apple TV Plus. Drive Away Dolls, right now it's on Peacock. I'm sure it might be somewhere else, or you might be able to rent it or find it somewhere else. I'm curious what this means for the future, though, of the Coen brothers. Like, if they will ever do another film together, I'm sure they must, right? They must have something in the works. But even if they don't, if they go on to do just their own individual projects going forward, will we get more stuff like this? And will it be as varied and as eclectic, right? And even if that's the case, I'm down for that. I'm excited about that idea. This is actually going to be a pretty short episode. I just wanted to talk about these two films because I felt like this could be a great double feature in terms of these two filmmakers and understanding their own different sensibilities. Because I think for all these, decades now, anybody who follows their work or who kind of knows the films in general, like they'll see but they do certain types of films. And of course they're all over the place. If you really look at each individual film, and I, by no means have I seen them all, but I know a lot of them that I either skipped or never got to. And I know that they're going to be different. So wherever, let's say, they end up with the next project, I'm ready. I'm interested in seeing it. So we'll keep this one short, I think. The idea was to just talk about a couple of films because I really needed a break after Godzilla. That was a big run. And I've actually got a couple of other interesting things lined up for some future episodes. But in the meantime, look, we'll keep it short. Go to filmstreak.com if you want to hear much longer and maybe better episodes. And if you want, I also have a list on IMDb of all of the films I've talked about. We're coming up to 450 now. Can you believe it? So you can go there, you can add them to your list, you can rate them, see where they're available to stream, and check them out. So that's me for now. We'll catch up next week, next episode. See you later. Go watch something new.